for you, Lewis. You spoke about the rear tyre temperatures not being right. What were you trying to do to set that right? Was it a different kind of preparation lap or what? What could be done?
Just the way that we had it going today. Just the rears weren't there.
In terms of tomorrow then, we saw you come through and make some places up in the sprints. You've taken some of the rear wing out. Could you have a better day on Sunday?
Not from where I am. And that's the weekend now, pretty much.
What happens when the most successful driver of the modern era loses faith in his team and says it out loud in front of everyone? Are we witnessing the beginning of the end of the Hamilton era at Ferrari? This seemingly harmless phrase was actually the breaking point of a narrative that had been brewing since the first preseason test. Every time he went out on the runway, the SF-25 failed him. Every time he seemed to find a rhythm, something got in the way. A bad strategic decision, a yellow flag at the worst moment, a setup that didn't work, or simply a car that didn't perform. Every bad result, every premature elimination, every session where he was left out of the top 10 was creating an internal tension that only needed a trigger. That trigger came with brutal irony at Interlagos. In SQ2, Hamilton had only one chance to qualify for the finals. He was in position. The car wasn't perfect, but it seemed to have a slight chance. He just needed to complete his fastest lap. But he couldn't. The reason? His teammate, Charles Leclerc, lost control of the Ferrari at turn 10, causing a double yellow flag that forced everyone to lift their feet, including Hamilton. Time ran out. The opportunity disappeared. And with it, any illusion that this time things would be different. That moment changed everything. Because it wasn't just a ruined lap. It was a perfect representation of the year he has lived. Blocked, slowed down, hindered by external factors that he does not control. In this case, for a teammate who, like him, is suffering with a car that does not meet the demands of a team like Ferrari. What makes that phrase even more significant is its tone. There was no anger. There was no claim. It was pure resignation. It was as if Hamilton, in that moment, understood that there is nothing he can do. That no matter how prepared you are, how fast you can be, how much experience you have, if the environment fails, all your talent is wasted. The internal camera captured the subsequent silence. There was no discussion. Only the noise of the car returning to the pits and the mental echo of a phrase that, without looking for it, said everything. Every time does not talk about an isolated event. Talk about a pattern. Of a toxic repetition. Of a constant déjà vu that transforms motivation into exhaustion and hope into routine. In Formula One, details are everything. And Hamilton knows how to read those details better than anyone. So when his voice cracked over the radio, the entire paddock knew there was something deeper at play. It wasn't just a frustration of the moment. It was an implicit statement. The Ferrari project is not working. And he knows it. This moment might seem insignificant compared to a victory or a pole position. But for those who understand the psychology of champions, this was one of the most powerful moments of the season. Because it wasn't planned. It was honest. Raw. And in that rawness, he revealed the current state of not only a driver, but an entire team. After the devastating elimination in sprint qualifying in Brazil, Lewis Hamilton did not limit himself to what he said on the radio. A few minutes later, in front of the cameras, he blurted out a truth that cracked the foundations of the optimistic discourse that Ferrari had built for weeks. With a cold look, but with a tone full of disappointment, he blurted out the phrase, "The team thought we were much faster than we really are." A harsh sentence without embellishments, direct. And for that reason, impossible to ignore. What Hamilton said was not just a pointed criticism. It was an emotional and technical X-ray of a project that reached 2025 and was sold as the great bid for redemption. The SF-25 was promoted by Maranello as a revolutionized single-seater, with aerodynamic improvements, a redesigned floor and more stable behavior in fast corners. The wind tunnel numbers were promising. The simulations showed competitive times. But none of that translated on the track when the stopwatch started ticking in real conditions. What Lewis denounced with that single phrase was a fundamental disconnect between the team's internal projections and the relentless reality of the asphalt. In other words, Ferrari fooled itself. The team's technical direction, led by Frédéric Vasseur, projected excessive expectations based on theoretical models. They did not adequately calibrate the correlation between simulator and real track. And that, in modern Formula One, is a capital sin. This disconnection has had constant and cumulative consequences. In Austin, in Mexico, even in China, the car had flashes but never consistency. Leclerc achieved a couple of podiums. Hamilton had a promising qualifying. But every weekend seemed like a roller coaster. What worked one day collapsed the next. Each adjustment seemed to produce unwanted side effects. And the pilots, far from finding confidence, only accumulated uncertainty. Brazil was the last straw. The Interlagos layout, with its mix of linked curves and high lateral load areas, mercilessly exposed the structural weaknesses of the SF25. Not only was it slow in fast corners, it was also unstable in traction and suffers when the track is hot. It was as if the car had no clear identity. Neither fast in a straight line, nor strong in curves, nor efficient in degradation. A car that is mediocre at everything is the worst possible scenario for a driver like Hamilton, who needs a predictable platform to squeeze out his clean, methodical driving style. When Lewis says they thought we were faster, what he is revealing is something much deeper: the lack of structural self-criticism within Ferrari. It is pointing to an internal culture that continues to fall into the same old mistakes. Overestimate your progress, minimize your problems, and believe that, with motivation and tradition, they can compete against teams that live on millimetric technical precision like McLaren or Mercedes. The most tragic part of this criticism is that it was not made with a destructive intention. Hamilton didn't scream. He did not accuse anyone with names. He did it from a place of disappointment, like someone who expected more. As someone who believed in the project, worked with the engineers, trusted the simulator, and found the harsh truth too late. The value of this statement is that it transcends Ferrari. It is a mirror for all of F1. Because when the most successful driver of his generation questions the way decisions are made within one of motorsport's most legendary teams, the entire paddock listens. And the fans too. Because it reveals a problem that cannot be fixed with an improvement to the rear wing or a new engine map. The problem is in the DNA of how information is managed, how performance is evaluated, and how reality is communicated within the team. Ferrari at that point was no longer just a red car that didn't qualify well. It was a team trapped between nostalgia for its past glory and the inability to build a competitive future with solid foundations. And Lewis Hamilton, without looking for it, became the involuntary spokesman for that silent crisis. Ferrari's SF25 is not a slow car by default. In fact, its pre-season simulations projected it as one of the 3 cars with the greatest aerodynamic capacity in the championship. But if this 2025 season has shown anything, it is that being theoretically competitive means nothing if technical execution and behavior on the track are not perfectly aligned with operational reality. And that is precisely the drama of the SF25. A car that lives trapped in the abyss between theory and practice. One of the most persistent problems with the SF25 lies in its extreme sensitivity to ride height, a critical parameter in the current era of ground effect cars. Since 2022, F1 has pivoted towards an aerodynamic concept that prioritizes the generation of load by the Venturi effect, that is, using the tunnels in the floor of the car to suck the chassis towards the track. But this principle has a fundamental condition. The bottom of the car must be kept extremely close to the asphalt for this effect to work correctly. And that's where Ferrari has stumbled time and time again. The SF25 was designed to operate at the lower limit allowed by the regulations, seeking to maximize aerodynamic efficiency without compromising reliability. But in practice, any slight variation in height, whether due to temperature, fuel, tires, curbs, or lateral load, completely destabilizes the car. When it moves just a few millimeters away from its optimal window, the SF25 becomes a nervous, unpredictable car that progressively loses grip in both the front and rear axle. In simple terms, either it's perfect, or it's a disaster. Added to this is the limited versatility of the car at the setup level. While teams like Mercedes and Aston Martin have developed chassis philosophies that allow fine adjustments without structural penalties, Ferrari depends on radical changes to achieve small advances. This means that each free session becomes a Russian roulette of experimentation, taking away from real simulation time and affecting preparation for qualifying and racing. In terms of technical evolution, the team has attempted to mitigate these issues with modifications to the rear suspension and diffuser. But the structural rigidity of the aerodynamic package limits how much flexibility they have without redesigning critical parts of the flat bottom. And with the current budget limit, changing these components in the middle of the season is extremely costly, both in time and resources. All of this creates a scenario where the car not only fails in absolute performance, but also does not allow its drivers to adapt progressively. It's as if the car demands ideal conditions that rarely occur in modern F1. No wind, no potholes, no traffic, no temperature changes. A utopia that simply does not exist. And this technical dilemma becomes even more tragic when we consider the magnitude of the project. Ferrari has spent years investing millions to close the gap with Red Bull and McLaren. The SF25 not only had to be competitive, it had to be the car that returned the prancing horse to the fight for the title. But instead, it has become a technical prison that does not allow Hamilton or Leclerc to show their true level. When Lewis Hamilton said on the radio, "Yeah, every time mate," he was doing more than just expressing frustration. He was verbalizing the invisible weight that a pilot of his caliber carries when the environment is not up to his standards. It was not a casual comment. It was an involuntary confession. It was, without intending it, a manifesto of the disconnection between expectation and reality within the most emblematic team in motorsports. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.